Welcome to the premiere episode of Beyond the Medallion, a limited series audio podcast brought to you by the U.S. Presidential Scholars Foundation. I'm Thomas, co host of the podcast and a 2024 New York State U.S. Presidential Scholar. I'm currently attending the Rochester Institute of Technology for a bachelor's master's in computer engineering.
Hi, everyone. I'm your other co-host of the Beyond the Medallion podcast. My name is Raga Kadali, and I am a 2024 scholar from Virginia. I also serve on the Young Scholars Council with Thomas. We're both on the Communications and Advocacy Committee, and I'm currently a rising sophomore at the University of Texas at Austin, studying business honors and finance. Now, the purpose of this podcast is to be an exciting new programming piece from the Young Scholars Council to showcase the vast talent, experiences, and goals of the Presidential Scholars community and Foundation at large. It's also an attempt for us to diversify the way that the Foundation communicates with alum and connect with the scholars in a different way.
The U.S. Presidential Scholars Foundation honors the nation's highest achieving graduating high school seniors and recent alumni by investing in their potential. We provide funding, offer leadership workshops, and connect scholars with civic and professional networks. Our goal is to equip tomorrow's leaders with the skills, confidence, and community they need to drive positive change.
And lastly, before we get to our exciting guest for the first episode, a quick description of the Young Scholars Council. So this council brings presidential scholars from freshly graduated high school seniors through college seniors into the heart of nonprofit leadership. Council members step into a board setting, learn how decisions get made, shape national programs, and lead outreach projects. Along the way, they gain governance experience, forge lasting peer connections, and amplify the foundation's impact.
Our special guest for the premiere podcast episode is John Knox. John Knox is Josiah Meggs Distinguished Teacher Professor of Geography at the University of Georgia, where he has taught weather, climate, and physical geography to more than 6,000 students since 2001. He has earned national honors for both teaching and research and received a college-wide award for student advising. John has also served on the boards of 2 campus ministries and on the Clark County Board of Education. A 1983 Presidential Scholar from Alabama, he has helped build the Presidential Scholars Alumni Organization since 1996, led the Alumni Association from 2015 until its merger with the Foundation, and now serves as Vice Chair of the Presidential Scholars Foundation. He believes good things always happen when scholars gather, whether in person or online.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Dive into our first set of questions, and these are just to kind of get to know Dr. Knox a little bit better. So, firstly, John, you grew up in Alabama and became a 1983 presidential scholar. What moment or person first sparked your passion for meteorology?
It was an event, actually. When I was 4 years old, I was at a baseball game in Birmingham. The Southern League All-Stars were playing the Atlanta Braves in an exhibition game in August, which is unusual. That was back in the days when pro teams did whatever the owners said. So in the middle of a pennant race, they did an exhibition in Birmingham. And so we were there because the Braves were our favorite team, and my brother's favorite player was at the plate, and boom, lightning hit a transformer just outside of center field and knocked out all the lights. And the standing room only crowd of about 10,000 went, ooh. And the winds picked up right around that time and blew chairs off the roof of the stadium. When I said standing room only, I meant standing room only. And my mom told me to hide under my seat, and I hid so far back they couldn't find me. I was pretty scared, but I did stick my head and look out, and I saw the sky a whole bunch of different colors, which I'd never seen before. And so the game was ended, and we walked back to the car, and lightning was flashing, and I was hooked because baseball was very important in our family. Anything that could disrupt baseball like that had to be even better. And then the next year, my aunt sent me a book on the weather. She was always giving me books that were above my grade level. So this was like a 12-year-old's book for a 5-year-old. And I told my family I'll be a meteorologist. My family's mostly journalists, ministers, and musicians. And so there was no other scientist in the family. But I decided at age 5. I found out later that's not an uncommon time for people to get hooked by meteorology.
Fascinating. And I think especially the fact that you were able to find that passion at such a young age, I think that's really, really cool. So next question here. What did being named a presidential scholar mean to you back then? And do you have any fun stories from Washington Week that still stick with you?
I have a million stories, I think, from that week. Like a lot of other people, they'll say that was the best week of their lives because it was, especially back then, it was an entire week of festivities. There was a ceremony on the South Lawn with President Reagan present, and all of that was just stunning. We were on a panel hosted by the Secretary of Education. There was a reception, probably the last night, at the top of the State Department building, so you could look out over DC and feel like you ran the place. But what stuck with me just as much or more was that I was around my people for the first time really ever. It seemed like everybody around me was as interested in lots of different subjects as I was. They were highly talented, more talented than I was, especially the art scholars were just phenomenal. You couldn't believe how great they were. And so the people in the conversations really stuck with me. So as soon as I came back from that, I collected addresses and I started writing people and stayed in touch with several through college and some even beyond that. The excitement of finding your own folks.
It's incredible. And I think what you said there about finding your people is really what resonated with me, because that's a big purpose of why we're starting this podcast and why we're trying to increase the ways we communicate, because the ultimate goal of this community of finding your people is to be connected with them and to be able to find different avenues to learn and be inspired by them. So hopefully this podcast will be an excellent way to go about that. So our last question in this section is that our show, the title is Beyond the Medallion. So what does that phrase mean to you as a scholar alum?
I think for me, it would mean that what happens after you receive your medallion? Is this a program that just is kind of like hi bye, as quite a few honors are, or is it something more? And what we've been trying to do through the Presidential Scholars Foundation is to make it a lifelong gathering place and incubator of ideas and friendships for the scholars so that we can do more in the world. So I see it as it's the giving back part. You receive the honor and now what? And the answer is it's not like you just put it on your CV or your resume and that's it, but it can be so much more.
I'll go ahead and pass it on to Thomas for our next set of questions.
So this next set of questions is regarding teaching, research, and leadership. So you have taught weather and climate to over 6,000 students. How do you keep those lecture courses engaging?
The students are probably the best people to answer that. I'll tell you how I come at it. A lot of science professors, I think, at least historically, have seen introductory classes as being boring for them to teach, beneath them. And at best, it's just a place to connect with those few people that are just like you that will become majors or masters or PhDs in your field. And I hate that attitude. I think that's exactly the wrong way to teach an introductory science class. And so here at Georgia, I really have focused for most of my career, it's now 25 years, on introductory level education. Even though I've taught everybody all the way up through PhD levels, I found that the introductory students were really receptive and, in fact, hungering for more than they were getting from their introductory classes. So my philosophy is to turn the telescope around and look through the other end and look at class from the student's point of view. Because most students that are taking an introductory level class are not going to major in the subject, especially a field as narrow, really, in some ways, as atmospheric sciences, kind of a niche field. But weather affects all of them. And in fact, I challenge them at times. If they're bored, I say, what's your major? And let me connect my field to yours. It's not hard. Weather affects everybody. But I want to come from where the students are and meet them at least halfway, if not 2/3 of the way. And so I try to think in terms of what would be interesting to them? How can I motivate this subject? Why should you care about this particular topic embedded within the course-long treatment of weather and climate? And so I'm not trying to make more majors. What I tell people is almost all the governors of the state of Georgia have come through the University of Georgia. And so somewhere out there, there may be a future governor sitting probably in the back rows of the class and maybe not caring that much. Do I want to turn that person off to science, to act like I'm the expert and you're not good enough and talk down to them? Or do I want them to feel included and understand how weather might be a part of their life, so that maybe 30 years later, they have an appreciation for it, and maybe they'll not cut funding for the National Weather Service, which is no longer a hypothetical, if they made it to the office of the president. So that's really how I try to make it engaging, is start from where the students are and work backwards, and also to make it fun, because I think the other thing that science is perceived as hard, rigorous, pretty much all the adjectives that are going to be used are, it sounds like some kind of combination test and medical procedure. And so I use music in the classroom. I do active learning exercises, by which I mean active learning is in really getting your butt out of the seat and having students do things physically in front of the class. And so it's not like another introductory class. My goal, and I tell them, is I want to make it so much fun that you're going to come to class just to see what happens next.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I definitely agree that, especially with science related or adjacent majors, that it's really important to look at that perspective of the student and use their perspective and where they've come from to really engage them into your own field and give them an eye into it, even if it's not going to be their major.
Right, because it's not going to be for 90 something percent of them, and that's fine. I don't see that as a problem. I want everybody else to understand these things so that I tell the students that my goal is that nobody in my introductory classes ever gets killed by severe weather. That seems like a good goal. I want them to be the ones that know what a tornado warning is, and their last words aren't, is that a watch or a warning? Um, and so it's very practical. I tell them this might be the only introductory class they take that can literally save their lives. It is often said that some of our introductory chemistry classes here, they lead off with, more than half of you will not survive this class. And if you look to either side, one of you is going to drop this class. People remember that for a long time. Being intimidated, threatened, or belittled sticks with people forever. You can find stories of bad teaching from people that are my age. I can tell a lot of stories about bad teaching. And so we really need to fight that and work toward a user-friendly approach, because yeah, still there's the mathematics, still it can be hard, but why do we have to make it feel like torture?
Yeah, why do we have to make it harder than it already is? We're supposed to be
Yeah.
inviting and encourage as many people as possible, not even necessarily to go all in, but just to get a taste and get that necessary information that'll help them even in their day-to-day lives.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right. So you have won national awards for teaching, research, and advising. How do you juggle all these roles throughout your life while still staying energized?
Great question. I tell people that my job is about 50% teaching, 50% research, and 50% advising. And then I let them do the math. And I can't claim to have ever mastered work-life balance. My work and my life are very much combined. My role model for that was my honors director at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where I did my undergraduate work. And her name was Ada Long. And I always try to plug her because what she did was phenomenal for us. She founded the honors program at UAB. I was the first student recruited for it, so I started day one.
Wow.
And I just watched her for the next 20 odd years invest her life in her students. And so there were no boundaries. She didn't draw lines. And so she went the extra mile or two or three for students. She's the smartest and wisest person I ever saw. And she changed my life. And she was the one that really encouraged me to go farther and get a PhD and teach. And so I tell people, whatever good I do, I'm just trying to reflect that which was passed on to me. And I don't do it as well as she did, but I try.
Wow, that's amazing. And it goes into your point before about just how big of an impact those figures, even all the way up in college and through adulthood, really have on your perspective in life.
That's right. The negative can stick, but hopefully the positive sticks even longer.
Exactly. So you have served on campus ministry boards and your county's Board of Education. What drives you to serve outside the classroom?
Well, I guess it leads from the last question. I don't draw the boundaries very easily. I'm the son of a Presbyterian minister. In fact, I'm named for the founder of Scottish Presbyterianism, so I've always taken that seriously. In graduate school and later, when we came to Athens, I've served on campus ministry boards. At Wisconsin, where I was doing my PhD, I was a student rep, and I thought it was really good for them to hear the views of students. Generally, I think you can say in a lot of American institutions, there are a lot of older people that aren't necessarily listening to younger people. I think that's particularly acute and pretty obvious right now. But it was also pretty obvious to me 30 years ago. And so when I have served on boards and also in my role as a faculty member, I've always tried to channel and or listen to the opinions of students, because I thought first I was a student, and then later when I wasn't a student, I was getting older. I thought, well, I always thought the students had the best view when I was a kid, so I don't want to renege on that. And so whether it's a vote on a faculty member, for example, or a potential faculty member in school, or if it's a vote on a property sale, this is a true story for a campus ministry, I watch carefully what the students think and I ask them. And nearly every time I will go with their decision because, like I say, I thought we had a better view of things and were more in touch with it when I was a student. So why not do the same? As a school board member, I noticed that there was a real gap between students, teachers, and the layers of administration. And so, where possible, I tried to stand up for the teachers who I thought were doing a heroic job in our public school system. Pretty much everything the students wanted would have been okay with everything the teachers wanted would have been okay with students, because again, they're closest to the action, and so the teachers weren't necessarily recommending things that wouldn't have worked well for students. And then I found that administration, older people in the community with no kids in the schools but came to every meeting, folks like that had a radically different view of how the whole thing should work. So I tried my best to stand up for what I thought was common sense and the views of younger people, and more generally, the views of people that are closest to the action. I think in just about every realm, if you're listening to a top down kind of recommendation from people that don't know what the day-to-day activities are, it's almost always a really dumb recommendation. They're just implementing it and it's like, great, this makes no sense.
It's like a
um,
long game of telephone.
or worse, because the folks at the top aren't even listening. They pick up the phone and they say babble, and unfortunately you understand it on the other end and you're like, oh, hang it up. So anyway, that's what I tried to do, and hopefully there's a continuing theme here of trying to see our organizations and institutions through the view of the people that are at the bottom, or the ones that are supposed to be important folks. There was a joke on the school board that anyone who talked the most about, oh, we've got to do it for the students, actually cared not at all about the students, that they just knew that that was good rhetoric. And so I tried to walk the walk without talking all that talk. So anyway, that's how it all connects.
It sounds like you've done a great job really channeling the voice of the people that matter just most, or the people that are most involved.
Maybe. In politics, you learn that the best you can do can be mighty little, unfortunately.
All right. So, since helping build the Presidential Scholars Alumni Organization in 1996, leading the Alumni Association from 2015 until its integration with the foundation, and now serving as vice chair of the Presidential Scholars Foundation, which initiative or event are you most proud of?
The seed grants. The seed grants are a program that I'll take credit for it. I dreamed it up one night, literally. We were looking for a way to differentiate ourselves from other kinds of groups that are the one and done groups. You get the honor, and then what's the point? And the presidential scholars have always been charged by the president to do good. That goes all the way back to LBJ in 1964, that they were supposed to go and change the world, really. And so I was thinking, how do we do that? A whole lot of our conversations had been revolving around what issue do we adopt? And this should sound familiar because we've got a million nonprofits that are single issue. What should our issue be? Should it be education? If so, what exactly about education? We have that experience, but then we all go our separate ways. And some of us end up being experts in finance, and some of us being experts in engineering. And yeah, our main expertise is that we all went through the educational system and did very well. But increasingly, that's farther and farther in the past. And so it seemed like we were just at a cul-de-sac, not really being able to. And I woke up one night and it hit me. That was the wrong question to ask. The right question to ask was, how do we empower the scholars to do good in whatever they're doing? We don't choose the issue, they do. Give them some kind of help, whatever that might be, to do something that they couldn't do otherwise in their particular area. And so I was a leading voice in how the grants were constructed, because I'm a I'm a victim and sometimes a success of the grantsmanship game that exists in the scientific community. And so I thought, okay, this needs to be not like the grants process that we do. It shouldn't be long. It shouldn't have that sense of judgment. Oh, your grant has only gotten a fair, and here's the critics that don't think it should be funded. It should have a community aspect to it, and it should, above all else, like I say, empower people to do things that the other funding agencies won't provide money for. Because I know from personal experience, your projects can fall right through the gaps of what a particular agency wants to do. In my field of meteorology, I do work that's too applied for the National Science Foundation, but too theoretical or not weather related enough for NOAA, and on and on. It always falls through the cracks. And then the other problem with grants is that in the scientific world, the age of the person when they get their first grant from an agency just keeps going up and up. It used to be people were probably in their 20s, early 30s. Now it's more like 40 for some fields. Wow. Right. And we put in an incentive to reward people that were at earlier stages of their career. And also we put in an incentive for scholars to collaborate. And so those were all built into it. The best part of that idea is to take our group and use our resources to empower you and other scholars. It's infinitely extendable. The more money we get, the more we can do of this, or the larger the grants we can give. There's no particular definition of what it has to be. Be creative, especially if it's something that would naturally fall between the cracks of what charitable foundations would be able to fund. I think we've already had quite a few successes that have actually then led to synergistic growth in the programs. At our 60th anniversary event, we had a talk by one person that got maybe $10,000 from us, and then that had been parlayed beyond $100,000. And so wow. I like planting seeds. That's what I do as a teacher. I don't know who the next person will be in my class. Is it the governor, or maybe it's a future major in our field that's going to go on and do great things? I don't know. I just plant seeds. So it seemed like that's what we ought to be doing too.
Yeah, wow. I definitely agree. It was one of the most exciting parts of the foundation when I first joined it. That was really the thing that brought the most attention to me, especially after going to the 60th anniversary event last summer and just seeing not only the profound creativity that these scholars bring,
Right.
but also their drive and collective passion to have a positive impact on the world.
The reason I think we didn't come to that idea immediately and we went round and round is because it's really tempting, especially if you're somebody that gets things done, which I swear that almost defines presidential scholars. Whoever we are, whatever we're doing, we're often the people that are not in the spotlight that help somebody in the spotlight get done everything they get done. I know about a lot of scholars since I have done quite a bit of historical research, and often they are the workhorse behind the show horse. But when you put can-do people like that in a room or in a Zoom group trying to decide what to do, it's kind of a control thing. What topic should we land on? What should we really do together? And it takes the reverse impulse to find the right answer, which is what if we let go on the control of it and plant our seeds and see what happens? It's harder to do, but maybe my role as a teacher or as a parent even helped me see that.
Awesome. Great.
So on to the next section. So here, this is pretty quick, but we just wanted to ask a couple more specific questions about experiences that you've had. So first up, meteorology often works behind the scenes in disaster response, public health, and urban planning. Can you share a story or experience where a meteorological insight you or one of your students uncovered that directly changed the outcome of a real world problem?
Yeah, there's a really good and current example. You may have seen somewhere in the news online, very viral, cases where bounce houses, those things that you rent for a birthday party, where they get airborne and they fly away and people fall out of them. It's a thing. And every time it happens, it's not often, but every time it happens, it gets 100,000 views because it's the ultimate clickbait, because parents, they think of bounce houses as nice fun places and safe places where you can dump the kid, and when they see it flying and people falling out of them, then that scares the crap out of them. And so this can happen if this happens in even a major metro area, it will lead the news, because if you've got, especially if you've got any video, and it'll go viral around the world. Anyway, over a decade ago, a friend of mine on Facebook, who's a professor at University of Texas El Paso at UTEP, he posted something about a bounce house getting picked up by a dust devil and being thrown. And what's interesting is my friend Tom at UTEP, he studies aerosols, so the little stuff like dust that blows in the wind. And so he said, this is just like a much bigger dust particle, right? From his point of view. And I said, yeah, and it's weather too. We ought to write a paper on that. And then I thought later, that is not the worst idea ever. And so we went on what became a decade-long mission to eventually to do a complete cataloging of all the wind-related events with bounce houses where they had gotten blown away and caused injuries or even deaths, the kind of weather that they happened in, because for example, not too many people are bouncing in bounce houses when a tornado hits. Parents aren't that stupid. Or a hurricane, the really bad weather. So it has to be sneaky, windy weather. You're not really thinking it's going to be bad. And then to look at the regulations to see, are there federal regulations? What are the state regulations? And then to make some recommendations so that this stuff doesn't happen, so parents don't have their kids getting broken arms or worse, in some cases getting killed from these events when they thought everything was safe and they were just at a party. And so we ultimately found over 130 events worldwide
Wow.
over what I'll call the internet era. We did essentially 2000 and forward, because trying to find something in the old days, no chance. And so we cataloged them, looked at the wind events. Dust devils actually do cause a fairly large number of them. Outflow from thunderstorms. Thunderstorms might be 10 miles away, but the outflow from them can make the winds pick up. Even a sea breeze in some cases in a coastal area can lead to an event that causes this. So anyway, we wrote the first and so far only paper in the world on bounce houses and wind related effects, and then looked at the state by state regulations. There are no federal regulations, and made some recommendations. This is not going to be a paper that's going to get a lot of citations and all the stuff that the scientists looked for high impact, but it has had a high impact because now if you Google a story about one of these events, you will find our work cited. 2000 blah 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 study showed that there were this many events and so forth. And in fact, in Nevada, they're working on a law, trying to pass a law to enforce tighter monitoring regulation of bounce houses. And that's our ultimate hope, is that using our work as a stepping stone so that it's not just a one-off event, this is one of a pattern of events, that we can hopefully eventually maybe get to national regulation of these and save lives. The other thing is, as rare as these events are, there's much more common 20,000 or so a year events where the wind's not blowing, but people are, roughhousing in a bounce house. Somebody falls out and breaks their arm. And there's tens of thousands of ER visits in the US each year. In fact, these things are as dangerous as trampolines, which when I was a kid, there were more trampolines, and then you'd hear about somebody that hurt their back badly and so forth with a trampoline. So what we're hoping is the increased attention on bounce houses will make people more aware of it, and honestly just keep an eye on things. That the number one issue is probably, I can't prove it, but probably that parents are distracted, because it seems like you just put them in the bounce house, we're good, right? What could go wrong? We've got two things, right? The much more common one is somebody breaks an arm or something where they're bouncing and fall out or something, or rare cases that blows away and scares the hell out of everybody. And so if we can raise attention to that, then I think good. Somebody asked me in an elevator, what does your work have to do with it? I'm just trying to make the world a little bit safer place.
Really appreciate that, John. That's a really interesting story. And I think it just speaks to the power of research in terms of finding different problems that maybe aren't being recognized at a state level, or like you mentioned, a federal level, and really bringing attention to them and making meaningful change. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. The other thing I'll add is that it was an inherently interdisciplinary kind of approach. And even though I don't have a degree in geography, I am a professor of geography. And so that seeing together interdisciplinary work is classic of the genre, where we didn't just limit ourselves to the weather aspect. We didn't just limit ourselves to the engineering aspects. We had one student that was in law school that helped us with reading all the regulations, which I don't wish that on anybody. We looked at the 50 states regulations, and then there was the weather part as well. That's the inherently interdisciplinary work that I really wanted to do from when I was in college. My honors program was very interdisciplinary, but when you go into graduate school, you often get channeled in more narrow areas, or at least in my time, it did. So it took me a long time to get back to where I really wanted to be as a researcher. But I think being able to do it end to end, from what are these events, how common are they, what's the meteorological aspects, all the way to here's what regulations should look like, that felt very complete and satisfying.
That's fascinating. Okay, and one more question here. So this is a little bit more about your personal life, but when you're
Sure.
not teaching or serving on boards, what unexpected hobby or interest do you pursue?
In college, I chose to do the thing people would think of as being least likely for an egghead like me. I became a keyboardist in a rock and roll band for 2 years.
Wow.
And we played professionally in Alabama. And by the end, when I had to get out, I was ruining my health because I was trying to be a math major and a touring performer at the same time. And so we were starting to do shows out of state, and that was too much. But yeah, so I played in a cover band. I played keyboards on the heavy synth kind of songs, synthesizer songs, the late 70s and early 80s. And I've kept that up a little bit over the years. I've brought it into the classroom. The last 3 years that I have taught Introduction to Weather and Climate at Georgia, I always ask on the first day of class, get to know you kind of stuff, and do it on 3x5 cards. And I say, do you play in a rock and roll band? Which is not a typical question. And a lot of people will respond, no, but I wish I did. And then, this being Athens, Georgia, the land of REM and the B-52s and the drive-by truckers and a whole bunch of other musicians, this is still one of the hotbeds of indie music in the United States. I will get people to say, yeah, I do. And so I recruit from the pool of people that are musicians that play instruments we could use and people that maybe even play in a band. And I say, would you be willing to form a class band? And so for the last 3 years, at least the last 3 falls, we have done this, made a class band, and then we perform weather-related music, or mostly weather-related music. So we pick out things that they'd like to do that relate in some way to weather. Mr. Blue Sky by the Electric Light Orchestra was a favorite. And then at the end of the semester, what we do is I have a review session for the final exam, and it's long enough that it's a 2-hour plus review because it's a whole semester. And at halftime, at intermission, we play. And so we perform a short set of music for the students. And I've had students that are not in the band write me and say afterwards, that was like the highlight of the semester. And so that's a way to get students involved. It's also a way to get students to get to know each other. Ever since COVID hit, the mental health of college students has tanked. It was already getting bad, but COVID was just a step downward. And a lot of students are lonely and don't know what to do about it. And so I have had some students in these bands really thank me for the ability to get to know other students. It's pretty randomized. It's just an intro class, 300 people. They're meeting people outside of their comfort zone and outside of their bubble. Actually, one student told somebody I know in the education system here in Clark County, that band was the reason he stayed in school. He was having a real hard time. So there you go. It all ties together, right? In the end. But yeah, people would not pick me out for being a rock and roll keyboardist of limited talent, I might say.
I find that hard to believe. No, I'm sure that if you were touring, I'm sure plenty of talent there. But I have 2 takeaways from that. Number 1, we've got to get you to play live sometime. I would love to hear you play. And number 2, I really wish I could just sit in on a day of that intro class. I think just like from you as a person and a professor and your philosophy of really engaging students and just the fun things that you guys do, I would have loved to sit in on that intro class. It'd be awesome.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I second that.
Maybe we'll have to do that sometime. Maybe we'll have to have a reunion event where I do something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'll go ahead and pass it on to Thomas to talk about advice, your advice that you have for today's scholars.
All right, so for the first one, what is one piece of advice you wish you had as an undergrad or as a new presidential scholar?
Ooh. I've got so much. Let me do one apiece because scholars are normal, but they have some unique challenges. I think for just any undergraduate, I think for in terms of your college experience, take the best teachers for whatever subject they teach, even if it's not your major, not your minor, even if it's something just wildly out there. If you hear they're good teachers, give them a chance to inspire you in ways that you would not have expected and see what happens from that. Students, you have ample access to surprisingly reliable information called ratemyprofessors.com. I know because I read my evaluations and evaluations of hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of professors at this point, and I'm amazed at how accurate they are. Or if they are downgrading somebody because they're woman, person of color, person with an accent, you can read through the bad ones, and the good recommendations, the narratives often will help you out, and you get a better feel for the person. And so it's not that hard to find out who they are, or you can look up teaching awards, things like that, or just ask people that are juniors or seniors, who was the teacher you wish you had taken, and then just go and do it, because it's too easy to get locked in, no matter who you are at college, into trying to be the very best person you can be within certain defined norms. And you get to where you feel like you've just got to focus, focus, focus. And I don't really think the American undergraduate system is at its best when you are narrowly focused. I think our system's genius is its breadth. And I really do believe that. And I think that pays long term benefits to students' lives no matter what. In my case, British Romantic literature actually helped me finish a PhD and has helped me in my career in the sciences. I think breadth can pay off in ways that we don't readily admit to. So that's one piece of advice. Now, presidential scholars probably don't need that advice quite as much because they're interested in everything. But what I think they probably do need advice in is something they've never done or almost never done, which is fail. And so the advice for them, borrowing from Samuel Beckett, I think it's attributed to him, is to learn to fail better. So in other words, it's okay, and in fact, very instructive, to not be good at something or to try something outside of your bubble and find that you're not that great at it. And what you do is you learn a little humility, which at age 18, I needed some of that. And you learn how to land better. And I'll give an example from academia, or a generic example. If you're so good that the first time you really fail at something is when, oh, I don't know, you don't get tenure as a assistant professor. If that's when you throw a 3-year-old tantrum, it has a lot more negative consequences for you and for everybody around you than if you were 3 years old. There is a kind of arrested development, I think, that happens when you do nothing but succeed. And then you get scared of failure, right? You've done it all the way through, and now what? I have students for whom in college it's the first B they've ever gotten, or maybe the first A minus they've ever gotten. They almost don't know how to react to it. And I tell them that you're not going to be the best in your field. Just do a quick count of the number of people on the planet. There's one person that's going to be number one for any of 100 or 1,000 categories that we come out with, and you're probably not going to be one of those. So you need to learn earlier rather than later how to deal with that and to not just focus your identity on your achievements. There are a lot of unhappy people my age who are unhappy even though they did great. They feel like they failed because they didn't do great. If you keep that mindset with you, you're going to be an unhappy old person. You need to be happy succeeding at what you can uniquely do. The best advice is to decouple yourself from what you do, and that gives you the ability to fail at something without feeling like you are a failure. And you will learn from those experiences much better than if you play it safe and get scared of failure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's something I've been trying to accommodate myself with personally throughout college, is really just trying to embrace failure, because college has certainly shown me just how much embracing failure and being willing to fail in places that are safer to fail before you get into cases like not getting tenure.
Yeah, well, I've told students, to make it a little closer to home, I've had some students that say, I really hate to write. I said, guess what? Or I hate to speak, like public speaking. I say, it's much better to try it now and not do as well and learn from it than to lose your first job because you didn't have the basic skills. That's a much bigger pratfall with a lot bigger consequences. In other words, college is the place to try this stuff out. But we've created a culture where you feel like it's all about the GPA and it's all about never missing a step. I just think that just sets you up for worse pratfalls down the line.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Okay, second one. What is your vision for the Presidential Scholars Foundation over the next 5 years, and how can alums stay involved?
We have a collective vision for the foundation. I think the biggest vision is to continue to grow the community. Part of that is that we're working through whatever means we can find available to restart the national recognition program so that new scholars actually have a DC event. That is not easy, but we're brainstorming what we can do and talking to people that are in Congress that are alums and talking to other people that are interested. Expanding our efforts, some of that will require us to be doing fundraising. And so we're working on that. Our board members contribute personally so that we can continue to do seed grants, hopefully to expand it because it has that natural ability to expand, but generally giving back.
Awesome.
Whether it's to the scholars themselves, but beyond that to city, state, nation, world, however the scholars want to do it. So our goals are more empowering than limiting.
That brings us to our last section on this episode, which we've called our lightning round. So, John, we're going to go ahead and ask you just a couple of quick questions. Whatever the answer is you can think of, feel free to share it. But I'll go ahead and kick us off with our first question, which is, what is the favorite place you've ever traveled to for work?
For work. / work plus pleasure would be Edinburgh, Scotland. I remember when I rolled in on the train there and it was like, oh, this is home. You just had that kind of feeling. And it's funny because I am of Scottish heritage, but it just felt great. And my wife has since been there and she loves it too. So Edinburgh, keep going.
Awesome. What is one book you think everyone should read?
The book Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner. She won her Pulitzer for later books, but those of us who know it really think Housekeeping is her greatest book.
Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Night owl, that's easy.
What is one weather event you've always wanted to witness in person?
I'll say a tornado. I have seen funnel clouds, but I have not actually seen a tornado up close. On the other hand, I've had tornadoes go over me, near me for years. If you grow up in Birmingham, everybody's got a tornado story and multiple. So from a safe distance, maybe out in the Great Plains someday.
Got it. And lastly, how do you like to start off your mornings? Do you like coffee or tea? Just walk us through your morning routine.
My morning routine is a slow start. I am not a tea drinker. I have never had coffee. I made it through a PhD without coffee. So
wow.
Why give up at this point? And so I am going to be a slow starter, eating a banana and some fruit snacks and staring off into the distance because I don't really get going until probably 10 p.m. is when I'm really hitting my stride.
And hey, I mean, that fits in with, you mentioned that you're a night owl. Completely makes sense there. But yeah, those are all the questions we had. John, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was an amazing way to kickstart this podcast. And I definitely had a lot of takeaways. I'm sure Thomas did. And I hope our listeners did as well. To our listeners, thank you so much for engaging with this episode. We hope you enjoyed. Next month, when we see you all next, we'll be featuring some additional members from the Young Scholars Council to hear from a younger generation, more recent scholars. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions or suggestions you have, whether in the comment section on Spotify or to our email or Instagram, whatever channel you find best. Thank you so much for listening today.
Thank you.